Lazar is a church leader from Uzbekistan in Central Asia. He had his church raided by police. They took all his Bibles and Christian books. The evening after the raid, he turned to Psalm 91, words he had learnt by heart. He said this, "God is my refuge and my strength. I can hide in him. I don't allow myself to be governed by fear." The Persecuted Church are great mentors in learning in these difficult times what it is to really trust God. It's hard not to let fear and anxiety control us in these uncertain times. But, like Lazar, Psalm 91 can help us choose faith over fear. Let's just read the first two verses together. Psalm 91, verses 1 and 2. "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust." I'd like to share 3 thoughts from Psalm 91 with you, thoughts that have been shared with us by our Persecuted Church partners. First, keep it real with God. Hand over your fears to Him. This is essentially what 2/3 of the Psalms invite us to do. Laments. Pour out your heart to God. And especially right now. COVID-19 has gripped us all. We're worried about our health or the health of others. We're worried about job loss, being furloughed, getting through to the next payday, depression, about the anxiety of our children and the impact that isolation brings to them. It's safe to assume we're all fearful of something. When faced with fear and anxiety, it helps to reflect and to name your fears. What keeps you awake at night? Write them down maybe, note them, list them. This is essentially what the writer of Psalm 91 does. He lists the greatest fears of the ancient world. He is up against it, relentless pressure everywhere he turned, non-stop, 24/7. The imagery is all-out attack, wars, traps, even lions and cobras. And he talks of the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, the plague that destroys at midday. Sound familiar? These words are probably more relatable now than ever. But imagine what it is like in countries where poverty and persecution have a stranglehold. Bangladesh is one of these places. Put yourself in the shoes of Christians there as coronavirus hits. Open Doors partners on the front line have shared this. Some of the believers are starving. Some are forced to eat less so that they can maximize the number of days they can continue to have food at all. Some are borrowing money with high interest rates to buy food. None of them have received any kind of support or relief aid from the government yet. Would you take a moment to stand with Christians in Bangladesh and India? As you place your fears before God, pray they will too. Let's just pause and pray for a couple of moments. So I encourage you to keep sharing your fears with God, hand them over, trust Him. Secondly, God has got you. He has this in His hand. You're in the safest place possible. And Psalm 91 reminds us there is one who is big enough to handle our fears, God the Most High. God is with us in the toughest of times. He's got you safe. He is God with us, present in the darkness and the difficulty. I might not understand the why, the mystery of hardship and suffering this side of eternity, but I know God's closeness, His ever-present help in times of trouble, to quote Psalm 46. Let's look at Psalm 91 verses 1 to 2 for a moment. To find safety and hope, we're invited to dwell, meaning to take up permanent residence, to remain, stop, lodge, abide in the shelter of the Most High. He is our hiding place in the storm. He is our shade, our comfort. His shadow carries the sense of diminishing the intensity of the heat. This is the safest place in the world. And we have this compelling image of a mother bird protecting her young. God is defending you. keeping you safe, keeping you in his refuge, his shelter from attack. There is no time he's not watching you. We won't be consumed or overwhelmed. The Lord is our refuge, as it says in verse 9. He will rescue and protect us. God is with us in the toughest of times. Peace isn't the absence of trouble and pain, but he who is with you. In 1955, Wang Mingdao was sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison. He lived during the Cultural Revolution in China, back when China was the equivalent to what North Korea is today, the front runner in the failing race to destroy God's church. Wang Mingdao spent years in solitary confinement. When I was put in jail, I was devastated. I was an evangelist, he said. But Wang Mingdao soon realized he could actually preach down the pit toilet in the corner of his cell, as all the sewage pipes were linked and sound carried through them. His prison cell became his pulpit, the sewage pipes became his megaphone, and over 7 years 96 prisoners came to faith. He said, "I had no Bible, no pulpit, no audience, no pen and paper. I could do nothing except get to know God. And for 20 years, that was the greatest relationship I have ever known. When I was in the cell, the only thing I was focused on was getting to know Jesus. It was only me and him in that cell. You need to build yourself a cell where it's only you and Jesus." Maybe God is allowing us this time to really dwell with him, to abide, slowing us down, to build ourselves, so we really get to know Jesus and experience his comfort and security. The third thought I'd love to share is that faith is a choice. We need to keep choosing faith over fear. This is a daily practice. It's often not easy, humanly speaking, but we have hope. A casual reading of Psalm 91 in the light of pandemic and persecution seems to jar. It just doesn't sit right or seem to add up with the real world. But if we read Psalm 91 through the lens of the whole Bible, through the lens of the cross and resurrection, through Jesus himself, it begins to make sense. Jesus is with us in the present. He is with us now, and this life is not the end. Ultimate deliverance and rescue is coming. Faith in Jesus is not built on standalone scriptures. We know from the Bible that Christians aren't immune from persecution, injustice, sickness, or any other type of suffering. Faith in the long-term rescue of God is what keeps so many persecuted Christians going. There will come a better day when all our fears, all that makes your list, will be set right. Great news for people of faith, the best is yet to come. Psalm 91 poetically nods to this. Verses 14 to 16 is a beautiful fulfillment that ultimately God has got this in his hands. It will end well. Lift your gaze for the long haul. So, even in the midst of suffering, those most persecuted can experience supernatural peace and comfort. They can still choose faith over fear. So, wrapping up, let's reread Psalm 91 again together. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Like so many in the Persecuted Church, why not memorize these verses? Make it the wallpaper on your phone, a quick reminder, a nudge to press into God. When you feel fear and anxiety rising, pray those verses, meet with God, find the safe place. As we face unprecedented days, remember those most persecuted, learn from their stories of courageous faith. Many of the 260 million most persecuted Christians in the world are facing lack of food and resources, as well as the isolation and restriction persecution brings. They need our support. Please will you stand with our family in the Persecuted Church at this time more than any other, and be family with them. Please do two things. Please will you pray for the Persecuted Church and for the Open Doors teams on the ground aiming to bring hope and resources to them. We can't do this without you. Please will you consider subscribing online to stay connected to our persecuted brothers and sisters and enable you to pray for them. There's a link on the next slide. And please, will you consider helping financially during this season? I realise that many of the people listening to this will face hardship themselves, but could you consider giving something to support our brothers and sisters who have so little and face such difficult circumstances? Please give to provide emergency aid and keep hope alive, where both persecution and COVID-19 are hitting hardest. Please follow the web link on this slide to respond. Let's choose faith over fear together. Let's end with a prayer from Maria, a Christian from North Korea, praying for us at this time.
하나님 아버지, 지금 전 세계가 코로나로 앓고 있는 이 사태에서 주님, 우리들에게 말씀으로 인하여 두려움을 가셔주게 하시고 우리들이 그 두려움 속에서 빨리 나을 수 있도록 하나님 큰 손길을 베풀어 주시옵소서. 주님, 지금 우리는 온라인을 통해 또 사회적 거리를 두기를 통해서 집에서 모두 이렇게 힘든 시간들을 보내고 있습니다. 주님, 그 시간들이 하루하루 정말 기쁨으로 은혜 넘치는 시간으로 우리들에게 주시길 간절히 기도 부탁드립니다. 그리고 한 사람 한 사람 다 건강하게 또 이 어려운 사태를 이겨내는 강건한 마음을 주시고 그들이 앞으로 나가서 사회생활도 더 잘할 수 있도록 그런 큰 힘과 용기를 주시옵소서. 예수님의 이름으로 간절히 기도드립니다.